Hey,
Hi, Brian. Cool. Hello and welcome to the OpenStack Startup Series podcast from CloudDawn. We have StorPool. We have product manager and co-founder of StorPool, Boyan Krasnov here. Hi, Boyan.
hi. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining me here. I'm excited.
Same here.
Great, thank you. Yeah, please go ahead and give us a little bit information about what StorPool is and how did you get started.
All right. So StorPool is a software company. We produce this high-performance storage system, which is mostly used for hosting of virtual machines with OpenStack and also with other cloud management systems. We got started. We were talking to cloud service providers about a completely different product, and we found at the end of 2011 we found this need for a high performance storage system for hosting of virtual machines, and we designed StorPool around that need of cloud service providers. At the time we started, software defined anything wasn't a thing yet. So,
Okay.
we were doing it before it was popular, right?
Makes sense. So tell me a little bit more. How are you different? Like I can think of other set of um, network grade providers or storage distributed storage providers,
Yeah.
even within the OpenStack ecosystem. So please tell me a little bit more how StorPool is different and what is your USP is.
All right. So you can think of StorPool as safe but better, right? We focus on the block storage only. We don't do object, we don't do file, and we do block really, really well. Okay.
Okay.
The reason our customers choose us is because of performance and because of efficiency and price efficiency. So out of say a typical hypervisor has 20 CPU cores, and with StorPool you just take 2 of these cores to provide the storage system, a scalable high performance storage system.
So you probably take like a 1/10 of computer resources.
About 10% of CPU resources for doing something that's usually done on dedicated storage nodes with lots of CPU and lots of RAM. Right?
That's impressive. Maybe a little bit later in the conversation, if you could share me a little bit more details about your performance numbers or anything that's shareable,
Sure.
that would excite the audience. But before we get into too much of tech details, tell me a little bit more about like how big are you guys, what level of funding you are at, and also like I'm more interested in seeing like, I mean, everybody has some specific story around starting a startup, going behind a particular idea, particular inspiration. So if you could add a little bit more details on like what pushed you, what inspired you to get started on StorPool, that'll be great.
All right. So our background is in network processing. So our previous product. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Close this. Right. So our previous product was a packet processing box, which was used for denial of service protection and load balancing in hosting companies and in large software as a service deployments.
Okay.
And we just found this problem that they had, and we are kind of driven to fix problems for people, and that's how it started. It started with because we are not storage guys, we didn't have a lot of legacy of thinking of storage in a particular way, and we came up with this architecture which is quite different to what traditional storage people would come up with. It comes blank sheet of paper, looked at how storage should be, and like what's technically the best way of doing this, even in theory, and decided to implement that, which is distributed storage system, runs on the same nodes as the virtual machines, high performance, like a high speed network between the nodes, SSDs, hard drives, all that.
Okay. So it's kind of giving a fresh thinking for thinking afresh, or giving a new thinking for SDS.
Yep. And that the high-level architecture of StorPool hasn't changed since end of 2011. We didn't know about Ceph or vSAN at the time, so VMware hadn't released vSAN. If you look at it at that level, at high-level architecture, a lot of things, a lot of ideas at that level are actually shared between vSAN, StorPool, Ceph, and other distributed storage systems. They're just similar solutions to similar problems, but when you look at low-level architecture, there are a lot of differences.
Okay, yeah. Good, very good. Can you please talk to me a little bit about more your pricing model? You mentioned how you are like different technically, or at least at the high level when with respect to the competition. Is your pricing model shareable? Where do you stand on that? Anything that can help would be great.
So we most of the systems we deploy are high performance systems. We don't see many people aiming to use StorPool for petabyte scale archiving cases. Right? It's usually a smaller, say 50 terabyte, a high performance system that can do a couple of million IOPS. Right? That's a good target for us. And we have two different pricing levels for systems composed only of hard drives and hybrid systems, SSD systems, which we recommend to our customers. The SSD systems come at somewhere about $1 per gigabyte usable, which this is not what it says in the price list, but when you boil the whole thing down, it comes at around $1 per gigabyte usable. And we build these, so your total system cost is somewhere around $2.50 per gigabyte usable. So when you take the servers, the network, the SSDs, everything you need to build the system, it's about $2.50 per usable gigabyte. And unlike some other vendors, especially SSD vendors tend to do this, SSD storage vendors tend to do this. Unlike them, when we say usable gigabyte, that's the amount of data that you can actually store in the system, and not with 10 times gain with the duplication and all that, right?
Right.
So the amount of unique data you can store in the system. So there is, yeah. And then now,
sorry, if I may interrupt. Now the numbers that you mentioned, does it vary depending on whether it's a hard drive or SSD, or is the same?
So what I mentioned was the price for high performance systems, which are composed of SSDs and hard drives. In our case, we combine the two in a particular way, which we think is the best way to combine them.
Okay.
And for systems composed of hard drives only, the price is a lot lower. So the software license comes somewhere around a third of that.
Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, now do you, when you say it's a hybrid model, does it also give different quality of service, different level of storage services, depending on whether it's a high-speed flash drive or a hard disk, or does the VM is going to have similar? How are you differentiating from a VM's point of view? Is it going to be a different level of storage, or it's going to be like you do some hi-fi mathematics or hi-fi algorithm so that you will make some sense out of this particular data needs to go into hard drive and this particular data needs to go into flash? How does it work?
So that's where our hybrid setup is different. So in StorPool hybrid configurations, we keep a full copy of data on the SSDs. So this means that all reads come from the SSDs. There are no, reads serviced with some millisecond latencies, and then some reads are serviced with 10 plus millisecond latencies. That doesn't happen with StorPool. Which also means that we don't need this, complex logic that tries to figure out what needs to be on the SSDs and what doesn't. It's simply everything's on the SSDs, right? You there?
Yep, I got it. Cool, very good. Sorry. Thank you. No worries.
And so we keep a full copy of data on SSDs and 2 full copies of data on hard drives. and that gives you the benefits of both kinds of media. So both, low latency reads and writes, as well as a lot of throughput, as well as not so much cost, because you don't have 2 copies of data on SSDs, which is typical for simple high performance SSD only system, right? And that's how we do that. In terms of differentiating service for different virtual machines, so StorPool is fully integrated with OpenStack, which means that for each virtual machine, you would have 1 or more volumes in StorPool. And for each volume in StorPool, you can tell it that you want a particular IOPS or megabytes per second limit applied to it. So in that way, you get limits on service. So you can say this VM should have 1,000 IOPS, for example. Also, in a single StorPool cluster, you could have multiple pools. So you could have a hybrid pool and also a capacity pool, right? A pool with large hard drives for archiving or something. In a single cluster, and in that case, you can tell the system, I want this volume on the hybrid pool, I want this volume on the hard drive pool. Right?
Okay.
So you can have 2 levels of service in that regard as well.
Okay. Now, when the Cinder backend sees these volumes, are they going to be in? Let's say let's take the case of the hybrid pool, right? So, are those going to be on a specific hard device, like whether a hard disk only or SSD only, or it's going to be a combination? Where does the volume sit really in a hybrid case?
So, in a StorPool pool, imagine you have 100 SSDs and 100 hard drives, just for the sake of it. When you create a volume, different parts of this volume would be on all 100 devices. They're not kind of tied to a particular device underneath. So that you can think of the volume as being striped across all devices you have in the pool.
Okay. Okay. So the performance is not exactly the SSD performance. The performance will not be exactly hard disk, but it's a common. It's somewhere in between. But you optimize so that it's a higher throughput.
Well, you can think of it as all SSD performance, but without the more expensive SSD media. So if you look at the four classes of storage traffic you have, so random reads, they come from the SSDs, undistinguishable from SSDs, right? Sequential reads, they come from the SSDs, so you
all the reads are from okay.
Yeah. Random writes, we sequentialize them and write them on hard drives and SSDs. So this means you write randomly, but we do them sequentially on hard drives, so you get a lot of IOPS out of each hard drive, a lot more than people are used to. And then sequential writes, hard drives are quite good at anyway.
Okay.
So you do, so in all, respects that matter, the performance of StorPool, a StorPool hybrid is indistinguishable from an all SSD system. There is also the effect of peak performance versus average performance. Mm-hmm. And in StorPool, you get quite
big delta
quite
between
a good level of peak performance compared to the average performance you can get out of it.
Okay. Okay, good, interesting, very good. Now, tell me a little bit more about your company. Like, how big are you guys? How many employees? What level of funding are you at? And you are about 3 years old, a little more than 3 years old.
We're about 3 years old. We've had the system in production for about slightly over 1 year now with our first customer. We are 13 people, 12 of them in Sofia, 1 in London, and we have a sales director in the UK, basically, who's looking after our channel partners and distributors. And what else did you ask?
The funding. What level of funding are you at?
So we are, based in Europe. So funding is not that much available to us as for other storage startups. We've had three rounds of funding so far, and in US terms, you can think of them as seed level funding. We are not like we haven't received multiple tens of millions of dollars of funding so far.
I'm impressed. It is very impressive to see a 3-year-old startup with 13 employees with around $1 million funding or less, around that range. So, but yeah, eventually you'll need to grow big. I think when that comes, whatever makes right sense for you, you'll be making it. But so far, the progress that you have made is like impressive.
Yeah. So
now,
yeah.
No, please go ahead. Please go ahead. I didn't mean to. Yeah.
Well, in terms of funding, later this year we'll have to take the decision if we want to continue on this route and get another a lot larger round of funding, or we'll stick to a more organic growth model. But we need to get to that point.
Good.
We're not there yet.
More power to the founders. That's great. Good. Can you mentioned earlier that you were focusing on the cloud service providers. So please tell me a little bit more about your customers. Are you seeing around service providers? What kind of customers are you seeing? Do they fall into other categories?
Well, most of our customers are hosting companies in one form or another, or cloud operators. There is kind of a even split between OpenStack, OpenNebula, and another management system which is popular in the hosting industry. The deployments are not extremely big so far. We're hoping to have bigger and bigger deployments, obviously, in the future, but they're not that big at the moment. Something that a lot of them are quite interested in is kind of the overall efficiency of their infrastructure. So they think of not only how much would getting storage cost me, they're thinking of how much does delivering a virtual machine with these parameters cost. So that's both in terms of servers, network, storage devices, storage software, but also in terms of cost of operating it, cost of space in a data center, etc., etc. And they're like they want to be able to compete with the likes of Amazon and DigitalOcean.
Sure. Yeah.
And they want to be able to compete with these at a lot smaller scale than them. DigitalOcean has thousands or maybe more than 100,000 virtual machines, I'm guessing at this point. And our customers want to compete with them with 1,000+ virtual machines, not 100,000 virtual machines. Right?
Okay. How about customers like media, for instance, media use cases? Are you a good fit for media use cases? Are you seeing any traction in that area?
We've seen some interest from private cloud, but nothing has gone to production yet. And we've seen some interest from media, especially non-linear video editing. And we've seen some interest from software development companies and software as a service type shops.
Okay, so the latter one, is it more like dev test scenarios?
Yes. Yes. Testing and development environments, and on the production side, like backend for software as a service. So they would run, their own small cloud and put the application on top.
Okay. So what are the development companies doing? Why would they need a high-speed storage for testing or dev test cases, unless they are testing there's a specific need for testing with high-performance storage backend? But at a higher level, it would appear that they don't need, or they may not need, such a hybrid storage system. But maybe I'm missing them.
So it looks like this. It's kind of a use case which is close to heart, because we are also a software development company, and we know what it takes, what kind of infrastructure a software developer needs. for us, basically, every developer has a few virtual machines. Every developer has a small environment in which they can play, which is lots of virtual machines. So if you have a large development team, that's a lot of virtual machines. And also, you have these continuous integration systems as well as build systems.
Correct.
And especially for build systems, having a fast storage system helps, like allows you to build things a lot faster. Maybe, maybe it's not kind of the hybrid setup is not applicable for absolutely everything in that scenario, but there are, a significant fraction of that would benefit from a high performance storage system. There is also the question of, is it worth at all thinking about hard drive only storage at this point? So the same kind of efficiencies we can achieve for cloud operators with SSD storage, we can also achieve in a smaller setup.
Okay.
Something like, say, 3 hypervisors, right?
Okay, so it's more like, you are helping to improve the efficiency by improving the storage subsystem, but it is not necessarily that they need such a device, but it's overall improvement in your productivity because of a high performance storage backend.
Yeah, and it's also, so for cloud operators, what we see is that if you have a storage system which is a bottleneck, you can only host so many virtual machines per hypervisor. If you open up that bottleneck, you end up hosting twice as many, for example.
Right. Now, for cloud operators, it makes sense. For cloud operators, it makes sense. I was just curious about the dev test environment, but it makes sense. My follow-up question on that would be, like, typically when you say build system or storing files, like object store comes to my mind. But you are a high speed or a high performance block storage solution.
Yep.
So I'm just interested in learning more about how in the dev test scenario, for instance, like for a build system or your source control system, how is it being used? Is it just put all your source control repository on a volume, which the VM access? Probably VM is running the Jenkins or some kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So examples even from what we have in our office, we would have build systems which are virtual machines basically for 5 different Linux distributions. For 5 different build targets. That's five separate build systems, which are virtual machines, and you give us separate volume in the storage system to use these virtual machines. Same goes for continuous integration systems like Zoo and Jenkins.
Okay. Very good. Interesting. Cool. Very good. Thank you. Let's go back to kind of bubble up the conversation about now. You mentioned your kind of customers that you have, and you mentioned how big you guys are, and seeing what kind of adoptions you are seeing. What are your top 3 challenges, OpenStack or not? Overall, like, what are your challenges? The top 3 challenges.
Do you mean within the OpenStack ecosystem or generally?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. I will get to the OpenStack ecosystem a little bit later, but I want to bubble up the challenges overall, right? And if you want to drill down, if there's a specific challenge dealing with the ecosystem, we will talk more about that. But I just want to open it up a little bit before we drill down into the OpenStack part of it.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, as a startup, and we're not an open source startup, so we don't have this, large user base that we can use to build revenue on. One of our biggest challenges is that basically no one knows about us.
Okay.
We'd like to think that, we provide the best storage system that's out there, right? But still, very few people know about StorPool. So that's a challenge for us, and we are doing all kinds of things to improve on that situation, right?
Okay. So lack of visibility. Okay.
Yeah, in terms of going to events, exhibitions, getting things published in certain publications, etc.
Okay.
Then something that probably doesn't apply to a lot of startups out there, but it does apply to storage startups, is the variety of use cases we see at this early stage. So, you know, you have in our situation, we have a few tens of customers, and maybe about 10 different use cases within that. So, you know, I mentioned hosting virtual machines, but it's all with its small differences, right? So one guy wants to do it on InfiniBand, the other guy wants to do it on Ethernet, one guy wants to do it converged, the other guy wants to do it not converged. There's the odd one with their own cloud management system running containers, etc., etc., etc. So it ends up being kind of, there is a lot of variety in the ways people use StorPool, which leads to a lot of complexity in supporting it. Basically.
Sure, but you got to be ruthless, right? You got to say, okay, top 3, top 5, these are the use cases that we want to support for now.
Yeah, exactly. So that will come. Yeah.
Good, very good. And third challenge.
So we need to focus on that front. We need to focus on just a few of these use cases. We can't focus on everything. Right? That's not focus. Right?
Makes sense.
A third challenge. That's a third one. Yeah, I might as well mention that. So in this concept of software-defined everything, there is this idea that you take software and it runs on any hardware, right?
Okay.
That's kind of, if you want it to perform well, if you want it not to break, if you want it to, you know, to really deliver what it says on the thing, that doesn't work, right? So we learned over the years, right, that having kind of predefined hardware configs helps a lot in terms of getting a system that has the best performance, that has the lowest latency, that has all that. So our approach at the moment is we recommend to our customers what they should get. In a lot of cases, they choose slightly different things. So they would go for a different storage controller or a different SSD, which is the worst, etc., etc. And that, you know, because we do software, when you combine that with hardware, the results vary depending on what kind of hardware you put underneath.
Right. So would you
hardware integration has been a challenge, yeah.
Okay. So would you call this kind of a mismatch expectation from the customers? Can you call that, or?
Yeah, kind of. So for basically, if it was anything else, if it wasn't a high performance storage system, yeah, maybe if it was a high performance database, you'd have the same problem. But if it's anything else, you don't have this problem, and we have it, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think,
expect it. As you said, people don't expect it. People expect, you know, I had these, I'm retiring these servers from production, you know, they live for 5 years, and now I'm not going to use them for storage, right?
Right. So yeah,
that doesn't work that well. Yeah.
Correct. And you can move everything to cloud. I mean, it's not going to work like way. So you can have a VM on Amazon forever. So that's not going to work. So yeah, I mean, I think there is sort of education part that as a company, as a startup, that you have to do. I want to a little bit touch on the lack of visibility part. So if I remember correctly, you had a booth at the Paris Summit, and I spoke to one of your team members there. So how was the response there? Like, was that the first time that you were presenting in an OpenStack booth or OpenStack Summit? I'm sorry.
Yes, and how that was the first time we were at an OpenStack Summit. We got a lot of attention just for having a booth. That's actually the first time we've had a booth at an event overall. We're gonna repeat this in Vancouver and then at the next summit as well, we're hoping. And there is a kind of a very big difference between just attending and having a booth. That's what we've found, right?
Correct.
So
correct.
We met a lot of people. A few of these converted into customers. we also met a lot of kind of industry partners, and we're working forward with them. Not much has happened actually for the last for these 6 months, but it's also because we are new to the OpenStack ecosystem. The StorPool driver got into upstream for this current release.
Hey, awesome.
It's not released yet.
Okay.
So after
is
there are a lot more things we need to follow up, right? Like certification, etc.
Is it going to be available for Kilo or not?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Congratulations on that. That's a great news. Cool. You mentioned a little bit about like difference being an attendee versus as someone who has the booth. Probably like it relates to like what are the expectations around, or what are the results or outcomes from being a presenter there. What is the response that you're getting, right? That's good. What is your involvement with OpenStack overall? Apart from pushing your StorPool driver, what is your involvement here, and what is your contribution? How are you active? What is your role in the community?
We have a minor role. So you mentioned, so our primary interest is to get our driver in Cinder. We don't see why that would be a bad thing, right? It's, if Cinder supports all storage systems out there in the world, that's the best thing that can happen to Cinder.
Right? No, that's a great thing. That's a great thing.
And that's our primary interest there. We've had one person focused on working with the OpenStack ecosystem, like the OpenStack Cinder especially development community, and outside of our driver, I think we've only helped a bit with some cleanup and bug fixing, but I don't think it's much.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, you're short on resources. You got to do what you have to do. You are you're a relatively new contributor to OpenStack. Did you have any challenges in pushing your code upstream? Or please tell me a little bit more about how did that go through? What was your overall experience?
Well, it's quite an involved process. Like, we didn't expect it to be that involved in the beginning. So it's basically a community. So for anyone who's trying to do that now, it's basically a community that you need to get familiar with, that you need to get close with. So there is a bit of helping them for things which are hard for them or boring for them, and that makes the core developers a lot more inclined to help you in, for example, reviewing your code. It's kind of you help them, they help you. If you review other people's code, then they're more inclined to review your code. There is obviously the code review process. There is also, which I mentioned, there is also the process of getting the things you need into the roadmap. Writing the specs and actually getting these specs assigned to a particular milestone or a particular release. Because if they're not there, it's not, if it's not on the roadmap, we're not going to work on it, right?
Okay. So if I, let me rephrase it. So you had difficulties in the code review process, for an example. Overall, getting your code up was a little bit difficult, probably because we are new and the review process was a little bit slowing you down. What could have helped you? And also regarding the blueprints, what else could have helped you? If you were to do it again, or if someone has to do it again, what would be your suggestion, both to someone who's doing it new and also to the PTLs, for instance, or the community itself? Like, what can we do better to help some newcomers?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what can be done. So OpenStack is quite a large software development project. There are a lot of these things, like the roadmap and project leads and the code review process, etc. They come with the territory. That a large project, that's probably the only way you can run a project of that scale. So what could have helped us, I'm not sure. So with other projects, for example, we've seen this idea of kind of third-party add-ons repository, for example. So this is a place where, without accepting this change into the core project, it allows it to live and allows customers to use it with some level of improvement from the core project.
Okay.
So, for example, with our driver, if we in some other project, they have this idea of the core projects, in this case the core of Cinder, and then there are add-ons which are approved by the core developers of Cinder, but they're not committed into the code base of the core project yet. And maybe they need to wait for another another release, and then they'll get committed. But
Okay.
that add-ons idea, which OpenStack doesn't have. I'm not sure it can have it. It's kind of complex, large software development. Yeah.
Yeah, and if it's something that's going to stay there, it most likely will go stale. But if you want to have something like that, like why can't you have it on your repository, for instance, and just point your customers to that one, or anybody who is doing this on OpenStack Cloud, they could be pointed to this driver if you want to go that route, if you want to take that route. But nevertheless,
so you're right. So with OpenStack, that's how it works today.
Okay.
With OpenStack, you could have third-party repositories.
Okay. How difficult was the certification process, apart from the code, pushing the code upstream, code development and blueprint? What are the difficulties you had in getting?
We're still to engage in that.
Okay.
So it's different for different types of things in OpenStack, obviously, but for what we do, there is a continuous integration system which we're actually implementing right now. And then that basically gets and compiles all of OpenStack to make sure that it works on our systems with a live StorPool deployment, not with test mockups.
Okay.
And the other thing you mentioned, certification, we've found that basically all the interesting certification authorities, they want us to be upstream before we start any process with them. So that's happening with the kill release, and we're going to engage in the certification process afterwards.
Okay, yeah, they can't certify if it's not part of upstream, right? So
yeah, so they're not interested in certifying things which are not in upstream.
Okay, very good. And okay, you mentioned about the code review process. You had some suggestion about making the third-party drivers, at least pushing them a bit easier. Are there any other specific asks for the community? What would you like to? What do you want from the OpenStack community?
Well, I'm not sure really, because see, I'm not the the OpenStack contributor in our company, so I'm not that close.
It's okay. I was just trying to figure out, like, is there something that the community can help? I mean, you can always reach out to the community members, or reach out to us, or anybody.
Well,
what we can.
I'm not sure anything can be done about it, but if the whole process of developing OpenStack can be made simpler, that would help a lot. But I think it's a very hard thing to do because it's a huge software development project. Right?
Agree. Okay. You've been involved with the community for at least 6 months now. What are your thoughts about other startups in the OpenStack ecosystem? Your competition, other SDX providers, anybody? Have you noted someone, or have you any thoughts about anybody in the? It's okay.
Well,
that's just like.
I can't think of anything really. No, can't think of anything.
That's perfect. I mean, you barely have time to get your thing going on, so it's difficult to watch out how the ecosystem is working. So that's fine. Anything else that as someone who was involved in the OpenStack community that I can be of help?
I really don't know.
Okay.
So well, it would be useful if more people knew about StorPool, right?
Okay. That's one goal of this series, right?
Apart from that, I'm really not sure what kind of help we need in terms of interacting with the OpenStack community. I think things are going as well as they could. So we started the work on our driver, and we basically joined this community at the beginning of the kill cycle, and the driver is now in. So in one cycle, we managed to get the driver in, and in the next cycle, we'll probably succeed in going through the certification process.
Great. It's impressive that you got it done in the one cycle, starting afresh. So it's good. Good. Okay, we are about to be end of the conversation now. So, would you like to add any specific message to the audience? Anything that you would like to ask or talk about or mention? Please feel free.
Yeah, maybe. So something I see a lot with our leads and people we talk to, our potential customers, is a lot of people think of kind of when they buy infrastructure, they think in terms of absolute value. You know, how much is this going to cost me? This is going to cost you $100,000, for example. And when they see the number, they get scared, right? And I think it's kind of important that more people think in terms of relative value. You know, what is the cost per virtual machine? What is the cost of this infrastructure per gigabyte of high performance storage, for example? I see that a lot. I see that kind of every second person I talk to thinks about infrastructure in cost of infrastructure in these absolute value terms. And I think people should, think more in relative terms, cost per virtual machine.
So you would probably want to, maybe better term might be like you want to consider them as TCO rather than like per piece, right? Or what is your total cost of ownership and see the value there? Would that be a better approach?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So total cost of ownership and total cost per unit delivered, because you can spend, $1,000, you can spend $1 million, and these two different systems will deliver. One will deliver 100 times or 1,000, in this case, 1,000 times more value probably than the other one.
Okay.
Or the bigger system will be more efficient per virtual machine than a smaller one. This is what I'm trying to get across.
Okay, that's an interesting viewpoint. Do you have any numbers or any metrics that highlight how this view would help at understanding the TCO better or savings in TCO better? If you do not have anything right now, I would suggest that you can publish some numbers around that.
We're probably going to do a report on that soon. But generally, when you optimize your infrastructure, you shouldn't look for absolute cost, right? You should look for cost per virtual machine. And there are a lot of things one can do that actually increase the absolute cost, but also say increase the absolute cost by 20%, but also double the number of virtual machines you can run on top.
Okay.
Right. So that's the kind of infrastructure design decisions that when you consider the cost per VM, you can come up with them. If you consider absolute costs, you would never consider spending 20% more. Right?
Okay. Have you talked to any data center architects about this, and what is their response? How do they respond?
Well, people who design infrastructure at scale, people who design infrastructure that contains, say, hundreds or thousands of servers, they understand this, right? Most of our customers, they start with, say, 10 hypervisors, right? And they don't have this mentality of, what is the cost per virtual machine? Right? This is something that we introduce to them, which is, I think, more people should think in these terms, not in terms of absolute cost.
Okay. That's great. Okay, it's a different viewpoint. Not many who will be able to comprehend that, particularly if they are not dealing with thousands of VMs, for instance, right? If you're working on a POC, or if you're working on a 10 node, 5 node system, then you probably won't realize that one. So, and if you do publish a technical white paper, I'll be happy to share or talk about. So that's great, awesome. So I got all my questions covered, and I think the audience would also have a better understanding of what StorPool is and what you guys do. And you mentioned about one of the challenges being a little bit lack of visibility, and one of my goals is to bring visibility to OpenStack startups. And I hope this series gives some visibility to the awesome work that you guys are doing. Thank you for joining me, Brian, today. Thanks for your time. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
I'll see you in Vancouver.
See ya.